What's up everybody? Hope all is well. Since I started making Overwatch videos, I've been paying closer attention to player sentiment on a variety of issues, most surprising of which has been the level of interest and generally positive talk around PvE. More specifically, the potential of it. Where's all this coming from? Recently we learned it's still in development and it'll launch after PvP. Is this good or bad? Up to you to decide, but I'm here to argue the former, and with the extended time frame, does it change the expected feature set? I don't know, that can be a dangerous thing. But legions of PvE-minded players are waiting and hoping that someone will level up the genre and build the game we all know can be built with today's technology and creative talent. So let's talk about it. While PvE information is limited and dated, players are still very interested. I was surprised to find that there exists today, even in the most limited state, a passionate PvE community with hyper-competitive min-maxing in pursuit of a top spot on the leaderboard. And as Overwatch 2 grows near, I can sense a rising of the tide, so to speak. PvE has popped up more on the forums with a more vocal community, more press coverage, and even more creator content. It's the beneficiary and in some sense a victim of the coming Overwatch 2 marketing tidal wave. Despite no launch date and likely being a good year or two away, it'll stay top of mind, relevant, debated, and unfortunately by proxy have its expectations elevated. Why do I say unfortunately? Well, we all know that familiar mental trap where your expectations and hope for a game grow often unknowingly to impossible heights. I mean, I'm guilty. I literally built a new PC just for Cyberpunk, so regardless, the longer the gap between a game's announced and the actual launch, the more likely things get out of alignment. So I think Blizzard has to walk a tight rope here. We know the modes have been separated and they'll launch at different times. On one hand, they need to make PvP front and center for the time being so its launch is as big and smooth as possible. On the other hand, it could be problematic not providing info on PvE for too long because, as I mentioned, expectation creep is real. About those expectations, what's reasonable? I think the answer depends on whether you expect Overwatch 2 PvE to be an evolution or revolution on team-based shooters. It's something we'll talk more about shortly because it gets complicated, and how on earth does it have a following despite not even being a thing that exists? You know what I mean? How is it I made a video about Overwatch PvE that gets like 30,000 views? I make a different one about smurfing, which affects everyone, by the way, and it gets like 1,000. I don't know. I think that says a lot. Why are so many interested in PvE? There are a lot of superfluous reasons, but fundamentally, Overwatch is the type of game to attract that type of player. Teamwork is baked in with the holy trinity of tank, DPS support. It has a variety of mechanics and playstyles and synergies to choose from. The lore has a ton of potential. In a controlled environment like PvE, there will be a ton of opportunity to theory craft, and it's coming from Blizzard, who, despite struggling of late, has a history of making some of the best PvE content in the world. If you ask a hardcore PvEer what they want from a game, that's pretty much the list. In addition, there are more nebulous reasons. Every gamer falls into the most human of traps, trying to recapture what has already passed, and whether we're conscious of it or not, we're always looking for that next game to make us feel like we did so many years ago, futile as it is. And with Overwatch, I think a lot of people see a potential new spin on an old love, and knowingly or not, are putting a lot of eggs into that basket of hope. I also think some external factors are contributing. A look around the team-based PvE shooter landscape doesn't find much of interest or import. Destiny, probably the best of the group, Team Fortress 2, Deep Rock Galactic, Back 4 Blood, maybe Warframe, Division, all good games in their own right, but aside from TF2, they're all so distinctly different from Overwatch that there's no comparison to be made. So I feel like the genre is a bit limited, a bit stale, and while it does have good games, none really nail it. None are the complete package. Players are hungry for more, and seeing how gaming experiences as a whole have evolved by leaps and bounds the last few years, we're all sitting here just waiting for a developer to make the game we know can be made. Personally, I see Overwatch 2 as the first game with the potential, and I stress potential, to deliver the definitive PvE experience I've been waiting for. Basically, first-person WoW, just without the MMO aspect, or maybe not so much. We'll talk more about that later, but it's the only game on the horizon I see that can combine rich lore, deep team-based gameplay, and RPG elements that's also being made by a developer with the experience and pedigree to pull it off. I'm keeping my hopes in check, but all the puzzle pieces certainly seem to be present, and Blizzard just needs to put them all together. So yeah, if ever there was a game to be primed for PvE content, it's Overwatch. And if ever there was a game to be excited about having PvE content, it's Overwatch. But let's rein in our hopes here and be critical thinkers. Let's acknowledge we're making some assumptions that it will be a significant quality PvE experience. How big could it be? I honestly think it could be huge. Some may think this is blasphemous, but I think it could be bigger than PvP. Crazy, I know, but hear me out. To a somewhat lesser degree than PvP, it will have very little, if any, competition. There are other team-based PvE shooters, but do any have the same level of compositional strategy or flexibility of playstyles? Are any as charismatic? Do any have as rich a lore to draw from? What I'm trying to say is that it could attract PvE players industry-wide. Maybe not steal them outright, but you can bet people who wouldn't touch Overwatch for PvP will check out the PvE for just those reasons. On top of that, there's a built-in fan base of existing Overwatch players who enjoy the game for various reasons, but think they'll enjoy it a whole lot more playing PvE, and it'll all ride on the wave and excitement of Overwatch 2 PvP. Let's not forget the possibility of it being on Game Pass, and yeah, it could be the perfect storm for a genre-defining amount of players. Like I said, I know some might not like hearing the thought of PvE could play such a critical role in the game's future, but again, we're making a lot of assumptions here and none of it's come to pass yet. I personally don't see it supplanting PvP as the defining mode so much as complementing it. The demographics are different, though both add to the popularity and longevity of the game. The flip side of this critical thinking, however, if our assumptions are wrong and it's a dud, it'll be an indelible mark on the game and company. More so on the company, as I think PvP would survive the death of PvE just fine, but many would see it as further evidence Blizzard as a whole has lost its magic touch. I personally sincerely doubt this comes to pass, but I've got to be honest and admit it's a thought. Why don't I think PvE will be a dud? Well, let's dig into what a significant quality PvE experience is and could be. I've talked a lot about, well, a lot of players, but what's the minimum it'd take to get them here, to keep them here, and the maximum we can hope for? Now that we know PvE won't be launching anytime soon, does that change what we can expect from the game? What's reasonable to expect in the first place? What are the must-haves? There's a lot to unpack here because of utmost importance in this fragile state of transition is that players have a down-to-earth view of the content. As I discussed earlier, a gap between hopes and reality can sometimes kill a game the day it's launched. And while I don't see this as a problem right now, anecdotally from chatting with viewers or players, I see wildly different hopes of views of what it'll be. Most are reasonable, a few are crazy, but right now the gambit runs from RPG-heavy Borderlands-esque to plain Jane glorified archive missions. I'd like to address the latter briefly. Those who think it's just going to be a glorified archive missions, first, I agree that would be a letdown of epic proportions, but I think the information they've shared thus far demonstrates that both their ambitions and even the actual product as far back as a year ago are well beyond that. I understand where your concerns are coming from, the state of Blizzard and all, but I think it's safe to assume it won't be just that. A new engine, new assets, new enemies, new mechanics, gigantic maps, talent trees, talent trees for crying out loud. Even if that's it, no tricks or surprises up their sleeve, that's a pretty hefty upgrade to the archive missions we know today. So let's break it down. Realistically, what can we expect? What's fair to assume of any AAA team-based game in 2022? Let's consider this group the must-haves. An absence of any of these features would probably be considered a pretty glaring omission. So I'll rattle them off in no particular order and then talk to a few specifically. Guilds, ping system, game mode selector, game lobbies, some sort of RPG mechanics like leveling up, skills, or perks, good bosses, good boss mechanics, a variety of enemies, a variety of game types, titles, achievements, and of course, loot and cosmetics. Now, fortunately, most of these are already confirmed, and we've even gotten some detail how the systems have evolved a bit, like the improved ping system. Curiously, though, the two most critical, in my opinion, guilds and loot, have yet to be discussed at all. There's plenty of rumors surrounding guild system, so I'm inclined to believe that's a done deal, but it's, worth mentioning, it's still unconfirmed. Some may disagree, but I think beyond the actual content, guilds are the single most important thing for Overwatch, particularly for the PvE scene. Absent such, there's just no reasonable or streamlined way to build a long-lasting, tight-knit community. Anyone who's dedicated themselves to a PvE game and done so with guilds understands how they elevate the game, your experience of it, and the entire community to a really special place. Like I said in my last PvE video, guilds are so foundational that it is for many the one and only reason they log in, just to hang out with friends. The actual game itself becomes secondary at that point, but make it a good game, and the two just feed off one another and grow and grow. Content pulls the players in, and friendships via guilds keeps them here. But loot, on the other hand, nay a word from Blizzard. I suspect this is for two reasons. First, it'll arguably be the hardest thing to balance, and second, it could be the biggest reveal. Hear me out. By hardest to balance, I don't just mean from a performance angle, though that's critical too. Rather, by balance, I mean what implementation strikes the right balance between player rewards and maintaining some sort of purity of the game. Do they go Borderlands crazy and give everyone a million different weapons and gear to collect? Probably not, hopefully not. Or do they go the extreme opposite with only one special item for each hero that isn't really even special? You know what I mean? Like golden guns from PvP. Again, probably not and hopefully not, but deciding where that sweet spot is will be extremely tough, and implementing it in a way that allows adaptation after mass player feedback is vital. It's possible we see no weapons or gear at all, though worth noting they did give us a sneak peek of grenades already, but I think we will. will, because without it, getting players to commit long-term will be unlikely. Once the novelty of playing just to play wears off, PvEers want to chase something. Titles and achievements only get you so far, and often to get those titles and achievements, your character needs to power up in additional ways beyond just talents. And that brings me to my point about loot and rewards being perhaps the biggest reveal. Let me paint you a picture and tell me your reaction. Hold on, we need some proper music for this. Now imagine, you select a mission and launch in. Immediately, you and your team notice the enemies look different. Instead of the mechanical, null sector robots you typically expect, these appear to be somewhat organic. A melding of man and machine into grotesque yet devastatingly effective troops, hard to take down and cunning. Something is afoot and you're challenged in ways you've yet to encounter in Overwatch PVE. As you move through the mission, you notice some areas have been reworked into laboratories, and strewn about the tables are disassembled omnics and vivisected humans. This reeks of Moira's genetic engineering, but she's yet to be seen. Eventually reaching the final boss encounter, your suspicions are confirmed. Moira and Talon were busy trying to create a new enemy for the world, durable as robots and as cunning and deadly as humans. Out of the darkness walks Moira with a devious laugh. The room floods with her created abominations waiting for her command to pounce. To your left, you hear a wicked cackle and the words,
"Such a flawed creation."
"Moira? Two of you? How can this be?" "Enjoy my clone," she says as a steel door slams behind her and the fight begins. Assuming victory, you receive a rare quest item that initiates a quest line taking you on several more adventures where you'll try to snuff out Moira for good, and in doing so, obtain a super rare special weapon. Not just an enhanced version of the existing weapon, rather one that changes the hero's gameplay entirely. I'm talking Reinhardt's shield is now an energy-based long-range flail type gameplay. Now imagine you can chase these super rare quests to obtain super rare weapons for every hero and from every member of Talon or Overwatch, depending on the hero you're playing, and team comp. My mind would be blown and I'd chase them all. And if chasing gear isn't your thing, just apply the same sort of thinking to your fancy. Want some hardcore deep lore? Find it in these special quests, where maybe they even have extra special long cinematic cutscenes. Learn more about the brainwashing of Amelie Guillard that made her Widowmaker. Flip it and invade one of Torb's bases to steal valuable blueprints for Null Sector. Just want the achievements and titles? How about having Baldric von Adler above your name as Reinhardt, signifying you're one of the lucky few who found that storyline mission and obtained Baldric's hammer? Or simply the title of Overwatch for your guild, having completed every single special quest line. You see what I'm getting at? By building upon these missions and rewards, the possibilities for what you're playing, how you're playing, and why you're playing it all are continuously evolving and expanding. This is the type of experience I'm hoping for, because personally, leveling up just to level up will be fun, though only to a point. But that's just me. I can sum all this up by saying it needs end game, something beyond leveling to keep me playing. Now, earlier I mentioned how some people's thoughts and hopes were a bit on the crazy side, and not being a game designer, for all I know, a real dev could be listening and thinking, I'm equally as crazy for dreaming up the scenario above. I don't know, perhaps, but I am a critical thinker, and while I may have pushed the limits a bit here, I'm willing to admit up front, my next few ideas are legit off the deep end. Likely not even possible, but a few things that I'd love to be surprised with. First, common areas. I'd like to see areas in-game where guildmates can meet and chat in person. Something secluded and private. The idea would lend itself to the community we're chasing, a place to gather, talk about life or the game or whatever interest the guild shares. A place to organize and strategize and hold guild events. I'm thinking places like a large patio overlooking Dorado Bay, or a penthouse suite in one of the King's Row towers, or how about the arcade in Hanamura? Just a large space that can accommodate a few dozen players. Mini games maybe, proximity chat of course, so people can walk off and hold conversations. Second, PvE PvP. Have you heard of this? Destiny's the best example. They have a game mode called Gambit where it's two teams racing to beat PvE content in their own instance. A few times each round, one player from the opposing team is allowed to infiltrate your instance and try and ruin your team's attempt at beating the PvE content. It gets complex with timers and penalties and buffs and multiple waves, but it's a blast and there's a ton of strategy involved. Overwatch is a bit more casual friendly, so maybe it's just a PvE race between two teams with no PvP element. I don't know, just a thought, but I'd love to see something like that in this game. And finally, wait for it, mounts. Am I the only one who found the prominence of Sojourn's motorcycle in her reveal curious? And again, Aaron did say some of the maps were, to quote him, gigantic, so I don't know. Some type of flying mount that can carry a full team for Torb, please? So, final thoughts. Let cautious optimism rule the day. By all indications, it's still a long ways off, probably at least a year. We also don't know much about it yet, and Blizzard's going through some stuff at the moment, so there's reason to be cautious and keep our hopes in check. But at the same time, what they have shared is a strong indication that it's heading in a direction we'll like. Aaron himself said it's being held back in part because they simply couldn't do it justice in the amount of time and with the staff size they had. Those two issues have been mitigated now to a degree, and when I consider the situation as a whole, I won't be surprised if they absolutely crush it. If I put myself in their shoes, all the drama surrounding the company, the game, I'd be highly motivated to make the most epic thing we've ever seen, a show of force to both gamers and the industry that they've still got it, or at least the Overwatch team does. That's my hope at least. And with that, I'm done. I appreciate you taking the time, take care of one another, and I will see you soon.